You should also know that today of all days, today, the day the president was left in office by the Senate after the House impeached him for trying to get a foreign country to interfere in the next election, today of all days, Attorney General Bill Barr sent out this letter to all U.S. attorneys telling them that as of today, they may not open any investigation into a presidential candidate, a presidential campaign, or a presidential campaign staff member or advisor without express written permission from him, from Bill Barr personally. Now, there is a longstanding policy of there being heightened scrutiny at the Department of Justice for investigations that could have an effect on forthcoming elections. I could give you a chapter and verse on it after what we all went through in 2016. But this advice that was distributed by Attorney General William Barr today, as far as we know, this is a little different. As far as we can tell, and we have taken some advice on this evening, this appears to be the first time ever that an attorney general has established this new rule that he and only he, the attorney general personally, must approve or disapprove any investigation into any presidential candidate or campaign from this day henceforth until the election takes place. President Trump's defense to his impeachment evolved radically over the course of this impeachment saga. It started as, he didn't do anything. Then it was, well, he did something with Ukraine, but it wasn't bad. He certainly wasn't demanding a quid pro quo in terms of official U.S. government policy for which he wanted something for himself in return. It wasn't that. Then it had to evolve to, well, yes, he was demanding a quid pro quo from Ukraine, but that's okay. It was an okay kind of quid pro quo. I mean, by the end, the president's defense in this impeachment trial was that him demanding a quid pro quo from a foreign government specifically to help his own reelection campaign is something that is explicitly fine. And he's okay. Not only was he okay to do it in the past, he's okay to do it moving forward. I mean, the president's final defense was that he can use the powers of his office however he wants to if it helps him get reelected. He can do whatever he wants to with the powers that he has as president and with the powers and the wealth of the U.S. government to assist his reelection effort, even if it comes to eliciting foreign interference from other governments. It's not only something that it was okay he did, it's okay if he does more of it. Fresh off that defense, he is now, of course, starting to devote himself full time to trying to get reelected. How's he going to do that? I mean, in this scandal, it is a remarkable thing that Republicans decided to not admit any new evidence and to not hear from any witnesses. That will not stop more documents from coming out about this scandal, from Freedom of Information Act requests and from public reporting and from other investigative tools. Witnesses, important witnesses who never had their story told as part of this inquiry, they're going to be publishing their books and or testifying under oath. You may be able to stop one of them. You're not going to be able to stop both. Part of this thing ended today, but we are also still in the middle of it. I mean, this was an impeachment about the president's efforts to get a foreign government to interfere in the 2020 forthcoming election. The Senate chose not to remove him from office for the articles for which he was impeached in the House, which described how he did that. And despite the case laid out by the House managers in the Senate, that, in fact, he did it. The Senate decided to leave him in office despite that. And so, yes, the impeachment trial is over, but we are still in the middle of what gave rise to it. This is our slice of American history. This is our time. This is our responsibility as citizens.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.